Not sure how many of us were able to look at some of the characters in the Bible. Was any of us able to look at some in the Bible? Okay. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I did.
Okay. Well, thank you. So as you know, the assignment or today we are doing Girl Read Your Bible. What I've learned is that, we, through tests and trials in life, just in general, it is so important that we just get in our word. In our word, we find comfort. In our word, we find instruction. In our word, we find deliverance. In our word, we find correction. In our word, we find so much that, oftentimes with just the struggles of life and just life in general can really be, can really help aid us and really be able to just guide us in our life. And honestly, without it, I would be null and void. Just being very frank. And so June was set aside for our Bible study month, as we are preparing for the summertime. We're preparing for everything that may come our direction. I just felt that it was good to have like a mid-year check-in. It's kind of what this is considered, more of like a spiritual mid-year check-in, something that, we can kind of just fine tune or check the temperature of our daily walk. Of course, we should be reading the word on our own, and we should be, just digesting his word daily. But, just realistically, sometimes that may not be the case. And not saying that one time out of the year is ever enough. However, we wanted to set aside, because the pillars of BFF, it's rooted in faith. So without faith, we are nothing. We're best friend in faith. And so just wanting to ensure that we incorporated that within our, activities and events and just day-to-day lives. And so thank you all for coming and joining. And as I mentioned, this is just to kind of enrich our study. The book of Acts, the reason the book of Acts was chosen is because it's so many women in the book of Acts that really have pivotal roles just in life, whether they're business owners, aspiring leaders, workers, mothers, daughters, everything that we are, they are literally in the Bible. It even talks about in Acts 1:14 about the gathering of women. It doesn't name women specifically, but it talks about the women praying. And so Acts just really embodies womanhood. It embodies, you could find pretty much any woman in there, to be able to relate to. And for me, I'll kick off, what God has given me. I was looking at a few different women that were in the Bible. And so I just want to share this snippet. So of course we have Mary, the mother of Jesus. Not in the Bible, in the book of Acts. We have Mary, the mother of Jesus. We have Tabitha, who was also Dorcas. We have Mary, the mother of John Mark. We have Lydia. We have the slave girl, Philippi. We have Priscilla with her husband. We have the daughters of Philip. And then, as I mentioned in Acts 1:14, we have the women who joined in prayer. And so as I was looking up, just researching different women in the book of Acts, Tabitha was one of the ones that really just stood out to me. And I kind of wanted to share just some thoughts and some idea, that God gave me as I was reading the chapter. And I'm going to actually read it. So I don't know if you all, hopefully you all have your Bibles. I know some of y'all are driving. Maybe you could pull it up on your phone. But if you could turn with me to Acts 9:36. And so I usually use NIV version, but when I've been studying lately, I've been using the NKJV, so the New King James Version. I haven't quite gotten to the King James Version, but we're getting there. But I usually use kind of like all kinds of Bibles, honestly. But this one was the one that I decided to study in. And so if you go to Acts 9:36, and the thing that I found unique was a paragraph that was like, they have like little inserts. And one of them was, Being a Christian is not doing certain things, but doing certain things, but doing everything a certain way. And so like when I read that, I was like, oh wow, it's not about doing certain things, but it's about doing everything a certain way. And so like even the way that we approach our work, we should always be a reflection of him, right? Even the way that we approach our peers, we should always be a reflection of him. I often tell, some of my colleagues, because a lot of millennials often are not wanting to go to church lately. And I was like, well, even though obviously in the Bible it says does not forsake the assembly, so we're supposed to gather. However, if you don't, you should be able to see it through me, right? Like you should be able to see Christ through me in some kind of way. So when I read that really stood out to me. But anyway, so going to Acts 9:36, it says, at Joppa, there was a certain disciple named Tabitha, which is translated Dorcas. This woman was full of good works and charitable deeds, which she did. But it happened in those days that she became sick and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. And since Lydia maybe was near Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent 2 men to him, imploring him not to delay in coming to them. Then Peter arose and went to them. When he had come, they brought him to the upper room. And all the widows stood by him weeping, showing the tunics and garments which Dorcas had made while she was with them. But Peter put them all out and knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. Then he gave her his hand and lifted her up. And when he called the saints and widows, he presented her alive. And it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed on the Lord. So it was that he stayed many days in Joppa with Simon, a tanner. And so the reason that stood out to me so much, I don't know, hopefully, this is an interactive Bible study. So hopefully, I can get some people to come off of mute. But I don't know about you all, but when they had written her off for dead, and that stood out to me so much because I know through the tests and trials of life, especially, as an entrepreneur, as, trying to get your feet off the ground, or trying to, embark upon your career journey, or trying to, just find your purpose, find your path, find your niche, find whatever it is that God has for you. Sometimes you're written off for dead. Sometimes you're literally forgotten about, or like, oh, it won't work this time. Or especially if you had an idea before, or you had a business before, I can use me as an example, had a business before and gave up on it. And a lot of people was like, oh, she probably ain't gonna come back. And it's like that thing stood out to me so much because oftentimes even we write ourselves off for dead. Even we forget, all the promises that God has given us. Even we forget the assignment that God has given us because we get distracted or because we get, just really focus on things that are irrelevant. We embody the spirit of comparison. All these things come up on us, and then we're like, well, maybe I'm not capable enough. No, you're not physically dead, but maybe you're spiritually dead. Maybe you're emotionally dead. Maybe you're physically dead. Maybe, your physical body has literally just been so bound that it's so heavy that you don't want to even pursue anything anymore. And it's like that thing really was so good to me because I was like, wow, they had literally proclaimed her dead. And Peter, when she had an encounter with Peter, and I don't know about a lot of you all, but those encounters are so important. Those encounters, I had an encounter last week with a peer who really just spoke to my spirit. And I was just like, wow. It's like sometimes you don't even know that you need those encounters. Tabitha was already... So you can come off mute so we can, I'm trying to reach your sorry, Crystal, I think that was Crystal. But it was like that encounter with God is so important. It's like I had a moment with a peer and we started praying, and it's just like we just went into a full worship, and like I was able to really just release the heavy burdens, that I had been dealing with. And it's like that encounter, I missed it, right? I didn't even know I needed that. Here's Tabitha dead. She dead. They had pronounced her dead. The people are weeping. They up here reminiscing about, what sister did. They looking at her items, and because she was known for her charitable gifts and her act of kindness. So they're thinking about all these things that she had did. And Peter's like, the encounter with Peter literally spoke to the dead in her. Ooh, that is good to me. It spoke to the dead in her. Like oftentimes that's why it's so important about your tribe, y'all. It's so important to be able to have that opportunity to really just connect with people that can speak to the dead in you. Sometimes you don't even know that things are dead in you until somebody's able to speak to it or address it or tell it to arise. And I don't know about y'all, but I have had key people in my life that have spoken to the dead in me, that have literally spoken to where it was moments where I was just like, oh, this is a whole dead situation, not over it. Even with getting married, I had given up on that, right? Obviously now I'm married, but I had married women to speak to that void in my life of where I had given up on that. And then Peter tells her to arise, and Tabitha, she sits up. It was like all she needed was somebody to speak. All she needed was somebody to speak to her. That's all she needed, was just someone that could see her, could see that it was still more to her, to see that she shouldn't have given up on life, to see that, there is more life in you. Arise. And then Peter decided to bring her out. Let me show you. And to me, it was like, let me show you the importance of what you speak, or those that are surrounded by you, or those that you connect with. Anybody could have went in there, but that assignment was for Peter, right? We talked about assignments. That assignment was specifically for Peter. He was sought out to come to Joppa to come speak to a dead person. That thing was so good to me. So the encounter with Peter, I took away the request, because it was a request for Peter to come. And sometimes God will send us to places, to dead places, for us to breathe life. For us to literally speak life into whatever the situation or wherever we are. And then the last thing I took away from that was restoration, because she was restored. And sometimes we look at restoration as, being able to maybe come back to your old self. But she was restored to be able to then tap back into the acts of kindness and the charity. Like it literally speaks of her. It's like a little insert, but it talks about how she came from a small town, and it was a beautiful city, but she was known for her acts of kindness and her heart for the Lord. Her heart for the Lord. She had loving eyes that saw another's most urgent need. When the last time we prayed for God to show us the need of others? Sometimes I feel like we are, and I understand, y'all. I don't know why this is making me emotional, but I do understand that life is it gets a little ghetto over here. It gets hard. I understand that it gets rough. I understand that, the peer pressure of trying to, compete in your career, or just trying to make a name for yourself, or just, trying to figure out who you are, the pressure of that. But if we could just embody the selflessness, for one, just try it. That's all Tabitha was. She literally embodied selflessness. It says she had a heart for the Lord, and that she had loving eyes that saw another's most urgent need. Meaning it's like it actually needs attention right away. She had the eye for that. With skilled fingers, this disciple put her faith into everyday action. She stitched beautiful garments and distributed them generously throughout the city to widows and children. So she literally went out of her way to go to those that were less fortunate or wasn't maybe necessarily in her neighborhood. It said that she went out to the city. Sometimes we sometimes it requires us to go get out of our norm. Life, being an entrepreneur, being oh my, you can yeah, I'm sorry. I'm coming, Mom. I got you. But being an entrepreneur, being a kingdom citizen, being a sister, being a BFF, sometimes it requires us to go out of our norm. It requires us to look at the need of the person. And that's what I got from that. I got another one, but I'm gonna let and I saw Charmaine, and I wanted to hear if y'all had any feedback or on that, but she believed in the extraordinary. And to me, Tabitha just really blessed me. I was like, wow, I like Tabitha. Okay. Ma, go ahead.
I was just going to talk about how we can love on people, and like I was thinking about there's this lady where I go walking every morning in the mall, and she's homeless, and my heart went out to her, and I took her a change of clothes, a wash towel, and a bar of soap, and because I wanted to show her love, just because she's had on these clothes I know for 2 weeks, but but I kept forgetting to take the clothes. But today I remembered, and she wasn't there. So when we show acts of love and kindness, and we love on people regardless of how they look or who they are, then God is going to reward us for that. Because when you were talking about Tabitha, you know, she gave a lot, and sometimes if we just give a smile,
Yeah,
that helps people too. Because I saw a lady last week, and she was walking looking depressed, and I went up to her and spoke to her, and we just walked together for about an hour talking. So we never know how we actually going to actually um, entertain someone, or how we going to change someone.
yeah,
Because people, you don't know what's going on in their lives,
right.
but you can tell with someone. There is so many depressed people now.
Yeah,
There's so many mental people now. I've never heard of this before.
yeah,
Like I'm hearing of it now. So whenever I get the chance to show somebody a smile or to speak to them, and sometimes I just wave my hand at them, and I look up there coming across. But it's just the way that we are as Christians or as God's people, how we should be. We should be forefront for people to see, and for us to interact with people that don't have joy. We
yeah,
should spread the joy.
yeah. You never know how your light can impact someone else's.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Can impact lives. Charmaine, I saw you come out. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything or if anybody. Okay. Well, I know you want to talk about someone in the Bible, and I have another
There was
person.
another lady named Lydia.
Yeah, that's who I was. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the color purple.
Yeah.
And you can go ahead.
No, I mean,
I was gonna say, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, to your point, that you made earlier, Brittany, about someone else recognizing the thing inside of you that needs to be reawakened and needs to be brought back to life. I think that this kind of goes back to not even necessarily another person recognizing that you need to be brought back to life, but also recognizing within the thing that within you that needs to be brought back, right? Having that kind of spirit of discernment, right?
Yeah.
Because you would think that a person like Tabitha, death typically is like a sentence. The death sentence is what we like to call it. It's usually like a punishment,
Right.
especially when you're actively doing all of the things.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think that these like situations come to be a reminder of like where we stand within our faith and knowing God's ability to be able to resurrect the things within our lives.
Yeah.
Even if while we're doing the work, because sometimes we can get so distracted with doing the work and we don't necessarily focus on the relationship itself.
Yeah.
right? The thing that makes us the person that we are, the thing that helps us sustain as the person that He's created us to be, right?
Right.
And the one who gave us the heart to be able to do the things.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can get so overwhelmed with doing the things, being represented, and always showing up in that way, that we can do it out of autopilot and not necessarily have faith. And so I feel like Tabitha's story is a reminder for us personally to tap into, even if it feels like this is a dead season for me, because I have faith in who He is and who He's equipped me to be, and just how miraculous and how powerful He is. I know that I can be brought back to life just by His word alone.
Just by His word alone. Ooh, that was good, Shar. Just by His word alone. Of course, the word at that time was arise, and like it just reminded me of, just arise and take your rightful place. Like step into your position. Don't, we all have the dead seasons. They happen, but it's like, how do we bounce back from that? Like, how do we address that? How do we act behind it? Like, how are we responding to it? And what are we doing to ensure that we are hearing the voice of God whenever we are in those seasons? Those seasons can be very dreadful. They talked about the people were weeping and mourning, and sometimes we are the people, right? Like the widows and children, they were weeping and mourning, and we are the people. We weep and mourn because none of us like those dry seasons. Like we don't like those seasons. And Charmaine mentioned a really good point about death in that time, back in that time, obviously was a death sentence, typically of doing something wrong. But it's like, how can we just make things right? And I appreciate you just talking about a smile. Sometimes it's just checking in on people, like, how are you, how's your day, how's your mental, how's things going. Sometimes we do get so busy with life that we just kind of think about the subject at hand, or we think about whatever it is that we trying to get answered, and we forget to actually just, let me check on this person. Like, let me make sure that they're okay. So yeah, thank you. It was one person that you said you wanted to talk about. I forgot who.
It was just Lydia's in that Ananias.
Yeah, I must say you said okay.
Not Ananias, Sapphira.
Mm-hmm.
And how I looked at that was like, she came. Well, her husband came, but they first of all they sold their land